Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about the Petrovs. So after e4, e5, we're going to have knight f3, knight f6, knight takes e5, d6, knight to f3, knight to e4, and we're basically just going to be starting from here and talking about how white is going to just go about the process of getting a position from which he can play chess and just have a slight edge. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. Now, one of the challenges that people have in the main lines of the Petrovs, like for example in the Mason-Showalter, like after d4, d5, bishop d3, bishop e7, castles, and then we'll just say knight c6, c4, knight b4. If you go through all the theory, beginning with c takes d5, it really appears like black completely equalizes in these lines, to the point where you can almost analyze these positions all the way out to a draw. So that's one of the reasons that even here, people just started, just retreating their bishop and just saying, okay, let's just play chess from here. I have a very, very slight edge as white, and we're just going to continue to play chess from here, and hopefully I'll be fine. But even these positions are very, very drawish. So people were just looking for a position that was acceptable. It could be equal or close to equal, but they just wanted a position where they could just play chess and try to play for a win with white. So now I would say the modern main line in the Petrovs is this move knight to c3. It's just almost completely taken over as the modern main line. And the whole point is after knight c3, dc3, white is going to have very, very rapid development, and he's going to be able to expand on the king side in a very natural way. This is something very similar to the Stafford Gambit, but in this case you're doing it without a gambit. So the Stafford Gambit is unsound because, white has an additional central pawn, so you're never going to have dominance in the center of the board. This position is very sound because there is no central pawn here. The pawns are equal. So all that's going on is white's getting some extra development in exchange for some doubled pawns. And it turns out the extra development and the extra open file are probably worth a little bit more than the doubled pawns. Now, not that much more, but this is definitely slight edge white. So now when this position first started getting played, there was a bit of a debate as to how to respond to various knight moves, like knight to c6 versus knight d7. So the general consensus is you were supposed to kind of decide where to put your dark-squared bishop based on where they put their knight. So if the knight went to d7, it was supposed to make more sense to move your bishop to f4, and if the knight went to c6, it was supposed to make more sense to move your bishop to e3. And this is all very well and good, but as it turns out, it probably doesn't matter. White doesn't really care where he puts his bishop as long as he's developing rapidly. And that's kind of an important thing to remember because black can delay developing his knight for a while. Black can just begin with the move bishop e7, and then the question is, how should white proceed? Now, if you're going off the theory that you want to wait to develop this bishop until he develops your knight, you might develop your kingside first, but as it turns out, all of the strategies that give white the best chances to play for a win involve just developing the queenside rapidly, castling queenside, and then eventually pushing your kingside pawns. So most players here are just playing a setup. So what they're doing is they're just putting their bishop on e3. They don't really care where the knight goes. And then like after castles, they're playing queen d2. And then of course here, black is playing knight d7 because haha, you put your bishop on e3 instead of f4. But again, in practice, this doesn't seem to matter. We used to think it mattered a lot. It turns out it probably doesn't matter that much at all. And then castles queenside, and here's the idea. We're going to be continuing our attack with h4, h5, bishop d3. White's got really good initiative for what little bit of suffering he's going to have to go through because he's got doubled pawns. So here, white can just kind of continue to play for a win from here. So we're following this game after knight f6, bishop to d3, pawn to c5. We're following this game, Karyana versus Wang, played on chess.com back in 2020. This game continued rook hg1, bishop e6, bishop f4, d5, knight g5, and Karyana's doing the thing that people do in this position. They start conducting their kingside attack. So bishop to g4, f3, and now this is the plan. All of white's pieces are relatively coordinated, and we're going to continue assaulting the kingside with moves like h4, h5, g4, etc. So we have bishop d7. So the first thing Karyana does is he strikes back in the middle, safeguards the center, and secures his bishop's position on d3. And then after d4, he starts conducting his kingside attack, h4, rook e8, g4, going after that kingside. Whenever he has a free move, just advancing on the kingside, sort of like a sort of like an English attack or a Yugoslav attack or something like that. And also, this happens in the Stafford Gambit as well. If you play the Stafford Gambit, one of the big ideas is to push your kingside pawns, h5, g4. This is all the same principles here. So we have bishop to c6, queen h2, again, just trying to generate this assault. Queen a5, we do have to spend a move to safeguard the a2 pawn, so pawn to a3, bishop f8, bishop d2, hitting the queen, gaining a tempo, queen b6, queen f4, setting up an incredibly tricky and an incredibly clever shot, which black missed. Black ended up playing the move bishop d7, and of course this allowed the really cool shot. Pause the video and see if you can find it. This move bishop takes h7 check. And, of course, the whole point is that the f7 pawn is hanging. So if, for example, knight takes h7, we would have queen f7, king h8, and then we can play queen takes d7. We could just grab the bishop on the d7 square. That's fine. But queen h5 should just be completely winning, threatening mate on the h7 square. And, of course, if the queen blocks, like queen h6, we have knight f7 check, picking up the queen. And, of course, you can't play queen g6 because we just take the queen for free. So there isn't really a good way to defend against the mate threat after queen h5, and the game would essentially be over. That's, of course, not the way Wang played. He played king h8 instead, but this is just kind of equally dead. Karjan just retreated, takes, and then continued with his kingside assault, and now black is missing a pawn. So h5 happens, and then knight takes f7, another tactical idea that works. After king f7, g5, we're just going to be picking up the knight on f6 because it's pinned. Black tries to exchange queens, but now queen g6, and then simply resigns after the king retreats. Pawn takes knight, and we're got our material back, and we're still attacking the extremely loose black king at this point. So this is kind of the ideal. This is how things are supposed to go. White's supposed to continue this assault. And this is kind of the concept. So another way that, of course, black can play is black can, choose to develop his knight. And I guess in theory, if you're being very, very precise, you would plant your bishop on f4. Like if knight d7, you'd play bishop f4. If knight c6, you'd play bishop e3. So this was one of, I guess, the earlier games in this line, or, a game that was played a while ago anyway. It was played, I guess, 16 years ago. This was played between Magnus Carlsen and Anatoly Karpov, played in Moscow back in 2007. This game continued bishop f4, bishop e7, queen d2, castles queenside, knight c5, h4. So as you can see, even though we can point to bishop f4, queen d2, knight f3, h4, and say, okay, this is a better formation against this knight d7, it doesn't seem to matter. White's just playing a setup kind of regardless. So white doesn't really seem to care. So rook e8, bishop c4, and, Carlsen is just playing for the attack. Bishop e6, knight e6, bishop goes back to e3. We ended up going back to e3 anyway. c6, c4, a6, knight g5. It's all the same principles. We're just playing for this attack. b5, queen d3, threatening mate on h7, so now something has to be done. Knight f8 to defend the mate. So, I mean, there's an expression in chess, like when the knight is on f8, you're safe, you're not getting mated. And you might not be getting mated, but that's not going to prevent white from maybe creating some weaknesses and going after them and trying to play for something later. And that's kind of what happened here. Carlsen plays queen f5, we have pawn f6, we have knight e6 going after the queen and the knight. Queen c8, we have knight back to d4, we have all these exchanges, takes on c4, Carlsen keeps the queen on the board, queen back to f3, d5, knight goes to f5, rook b8, h5, just making progress, bishop d4, knight e6, queen g4, bishop back to f8, and then finally we have a breakthrough, like bishop to f6, and even though white ended up breaking through, we ended up with all these mass simplifications. And the long and short of it was we have this endgame where white is effectively up a piece and black had to resign. So that is another way that these things can happen. Black obviously got his knight to f8 and he didn't get mated, but that didn't mean that white still couldn't conduct an attack where he ended up winning material. And Carlsen was able to break through, win material, get to the endgame up a piece, and this endgame, of course, is not worth playing. So this move, knight c3, bc3, the easiest way to really play this position as white is just to kind of play it as a setup. You can just play bishop e3, queen d2, castles queenside, and you can play that against just about any black move. You don't really care really so much where they place their knight. That's not an issue that I think you have to worry about with modern chess anymore. If black wants to, he can delay the placement of his knight until after you've committed your bishop anyway. So it's kind of pointless to try to win that particular piece correlation debate. So that's basically the consensus on the theory right now. Just develop your pieces, castle queenside, shove your kingside pawns up the board, and just try to get some sort of an advantage and try to get an attack with white. And that seems to be what modern players are doing. And sometimes they win, and sometimes their position is just acceptable for white, and that's kind of what people are going for with the white pieces against the Petrovs these days. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.